That's my concern.
Everybody knows
I don't want to be that kid in the back.
You want to switch
Well,
soft
you
chairs?
do, but
I need to talk to you. I'm so excited about
I think things are going to start picking up.
Just wait for next
leisure and library and all the stuff.
Oh, did you hear some more?
Yeah, and reading the executive report and all. It's just,
So delicious.
it's just really exciting. Yeah, there we go. Exciting that,
Yeah, that's better.
just things. I'm excited
I was feeling like I
about
was a low rider there for a
frisbee
minute.
golf, and I'm excited about pickleball. And I don't know if all those things are right in the radar, but they're looming on the horizon.
All of it. All of it together.
Sure.
All tournaments. And even if I don't get to that
I got
stuff,
3
it's
o'clock.
community stuff going on.
It's going to be,
Okay.
feel the effects from it.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call to order the regular work session for the City of Sierra Vista City Council, January 23rd, 2018. We always have the call to order, but it's not required. Everybody's here. The first item on the agenda is the January 25 council meeting agenda items. And we'll, of course, start as we always do. The roll call, invocation, and pledge. We have awards and presentations. We're going to do city council business of the month, and who's got it for January? Rachel? Okay. And then we're going to have the inaugural award of the Environmental Merit Award. And we're going to have a presentation from our sister city. German youth are going to be here in town, so we'll have a presentation there as well. Then we have the city manager's report. On the consent agenda, we have the minutes of the regular January 11th city council meeting minutes. Any additions, completions, corrections, changes for the 11 January minutes? Okay, seeing none, we'll go on to item 2.2, which is the acceptance of a revised access easement for Plaza de Calibre. Any additional questions, discussion? Any staff updates that need to be done on that? Everybody good? Okay. Then we have looks like a extension of a patio permit for Gerald Reuterbach of Rough Riders for the Rough Riders event. Ms. Adams, would you let us know what that is?
Mayor Mueller, members of council, Mr. Reuterbach submits this on an annual basis for this event. Essentially, when you have a liquor license for a premise, you originally designate the area in which liquor will be served, and if you want to serve it outside of that designated area, you have to officially, with the state, extend your premise for the special event. And that is what he's doing now. It is a temporary license to allow him to have his customers take their alcoholic drinks out into the parking lot. This is one type of application that once the 30-day waiting period of the resolution approved at the last meeting elapses, will not come as a single resolution. This is just a one-dayer, and it is normal. The police department did a background as normal. They have no objection, and if approved, we will forward it up to the State Liquor Board on Friday.
So all he's doing is extending the premises on which he can serve alcoholic
Correct.
beverages. Yes, ma'am.
And this is the kind that we will no longer approve in the future. Is that what you were saying?
Mayor Mueller, Councilmember Calhoun, yes, this is anything that's a special temporary license are the ones mainly that will no longer come to council officially.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the council meeting? Okay, then we'll move on to presentation discussion of the 6-month strategic plan update. And who's going to do this? Victoria.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm pleased to report that most of our projects this year are on schedule. A couple of the highlights to cover briefly for you include that progress on the city's economic development framework continues. The first advisory group meeting was held on January 11th. It went well. A summary of the session will be provided to council in the next couple of weeks, and staff expects that the goal will wrap approximately a year early, with completion expected around the summertime. The Sierra Vista redevelopment area is progressing very well, and you've seen that process develop over the past year and are seeing it currently ongoing. The program is expected to launch officially in March if things continue to progress as expected. The transit study to assess and analyze operational efficiencies will be conducted by AECOM, and their final report is expected by the end of May. That report will be evaluated and a proposed implementation schedule developed and presented. The first condition assessment of the automated pavement condition survey will be completed by June 2018 to establish base road conditions, and a 5-year street maintenance plan will be developed based on those survey results and presented. Annexation of the Fried Town site proceeds on schedule, and staff anticipates that the process will be completed by next summer. And the police department has finished reviewing and evaluating personnel plans and also finished a workload evaluation for patrol, specialty assignments, detectives, and their civilian personnel. A final report with a recommendation for total personnel needs for the next 5 years with costs and possibilities of service reductions is expected to be finished this spring. There are a couple of objectives on hold, but those appear to be starting to move ahead practically as we speak, such as the HERF swap program launch, which is needed to proceed with phase 1 of the Fry Boulevard corridor and North Garden Avenue design project. We heard from ADOT last week that the webinars were starting last week and this week, which will be the official launch and ability to proceed with our application. And some of the fire department's objectives were delayed while they worked to launch ambulance services to Fort Huachuca, but all of those objectives are expected to regain some lost ground by the next report. I would be happy to answer any questions. We also have our objective leaders here today if you have any more in-depth questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Victoria, would you please say a little bit more about HERF swap? I'm not sure I remember.
Actually, I'm going to defer that to Sharon, Councilmember Calhoun.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, the HERF swap is a very popular program that ADOT had in place a number of years ago. It went away, and now it is coming back. The advantage of that program is ADOT takes hard-to-use federal funding that has a lot of strings attached with it, and they switch it out for state funding with fewer red tape, basically.
And costs.
And costs. Because all of that red tape does have a cost factor associated with it. So ADOT switches the funds out. It is not a direct one-for-one switch, but it is still advantageous, and hence why the program was so popular during the time it existed. They are now bringing that program back. We've been waiting for well over 6 months. We've heard it's right around the corner, and it appears now that it is, that we will soon be able to submit application for that and be able to get started with the Fry Corridor project.
That's great. Okay, thank you.
If I could just ask for clarification, I know that it's not a one-for-one swap, but can you remind me who comes out more advantageous? Is it the state or the city?
Actually, it's both. The state is able to get, that federal money, which they can use. The city, although I'm trying to remember if it's
90 cents on the dollar.
90, yeah.
It's 10%.
Yeah, 10%, 90 cents on the dollar. But when we consider what we would have paid to use that federal funding in additional costs associated with that, we come out ahead in this process as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and we don't have to then go through all the reporting and all the other various things associated with the federal funds. So it's actually a really good program. That's a win-win for both the state and the city.
Sir.
Real question I have is where it comes down to assess the number of police and fire personnel corresponding funding requirements, and we talk about total personnel needs for the next 5 years and corresponding costs and the possibility of reduction of services. Can we get some specifics on what's leading us down at least that discussion? Because I thought you were asking for more.
As I understand the objective from the strategic plan was, this is the number, assess the number of personnel that what we believe we need, and if we cannot fund that, what service cuts would be proposed as part of that. So that's what the objective is. That's what we're working on with that objective.
So service cuts elsewhere within the city in order to pay for the cops, or service cuts?
Service cuts at the police department. of what we would not necessarily provide services for because of the possibility of the lack of personnel.
An example is funerals and escorts for that. And those are the types of services that they're looking at. So not necessarily core mission services, but services other jurisdictions may ask for fees for and those kind of things.
So we were doing some of those services before, specifically the ones that you mentioned, and then we funded in the budget the additional police officers. There were additional police officers that were in a budget. I do remember that. And then we were having a problem filling those positions because that's when I came back and asked for to do the economic kind of switch out with the funding for labor that doesn't get allocated instead of going into savings or reserve, excuse me. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is if you have more cops slots available and you're not able to fill them, is that still also?
So we actually did not receive more cop positions. We're authorized at 66, which was authorized back in 2007. 66 authorized police officer positions. We currently have 4 openings at the moment. So that's part of the issue is filling those positions, but we did not authorize additional positions except for being able to overfill by 1 if we got to the point where we had those hired.
I'll go back and look. I could have swore there was something in the budget that was there. Was it fire? But I could have swore it was police.
I remember the discussion about the overfill.
Yeah.
Well, I believe the city manager said he would authorize an overfill if we got to that point.
But we have not been able to affect that because we've had the openings. We have fewer openings than we've had, but we're also always running into situations where we have officers on light duty or on admin leave, and that's what we're experiencing right now. So the problem is the overtime that's associated with having those positions open right now. So there are a number of factors that go into looking at certain services that the police department currently provides that maybe aren't necessarily vital but are nice to haves, and those are the types of things that the chief is looking at.
The 4 positions that we have open, do we have people going to school for those, or any chances of filling them?
Well, police recruitment is always an ongoing thing, Councilman Blanchard. There's turnover that we're always dealing with, and a number of other factors go into that. Right now, I don't know how many do we have in the...
So we have 4 openings, but that does not include people in training. So we have 1 in field training, 1 at the academy. We have about 50 people in the application process currently at the moment still active in the process. We just had 4 pass the written and the PT test just last week. So they're coming in. It's just a matter of expanding our applicant pool to get more people in. It takes about so we had over 200 applicants last year, and we hired 3. So that's about the ratio that we get on the number of applicants to hires.
Can you say a little bit about what makes it so difficult for us to hire enough police?
So there's been a couple things. Nationally, the view of police officers has been somewhat negative, which causes some issue for some of the younger generation of applying. The other is at meeting the background requirements that are set by Arizona Post and by our police department for getting qualified candidates. The other is just follow through. So the vast majority of our applicants don't even show up to the testing process, even though they are contacted 2 weeks out, 1 week out. They don't show up. We have multiple ones that fail the PT test, multiple ones that fail the written test, and then it just dwindles down from there. We failed 7 in background last year that didn't meet the background requirements, and so that's really what it boils down to. So getting them to get through the whole process has been a difficult, and this is nationwide. This has happened statewide. All the agencies are having the same exact issue and getting people through the backgrounds, getting them through, meeting all the minimum requirements just to get through the process.
Okay, one other kind of a follow-up. The numbers of police that leave the department, have we talked about that at all? And I'm just curious about that, because my next kind of question is, do we have any way of, after all that, to get people into the department, to do the training, to go to finish up the coursework at a cost? Is that correct? We pay for all of that training, as I recall.
Well, we pay their salary during the training. We don't actually have to pay for the academy training, except for per diem while they're up there. That gets paid for by the state. But our attrition rate varies, and it depends on, to be quite honest with you, with the economy. When the economy was not doing so well, we had a lower attrition rate. But typically, we will lose anywhere from 3 to 5 officers a year is the typical.
And does that exclude retirement?
That includes retirement.
It's retirement.
Okay. But the retirement's going to be the issue in the coming years. We have 2 retiring this year for sure. We have 2 that we know are in the process of applying with federal agencies. And we actually typically lose our officers to federal agencies and not other local agencies is typically where we lose them if they're going to another agency. So that is typical of all agencies. And most of them stay 3 to 5 years before they would be looking out elsewhere anyway. Okay. So they're not leaving right away. Okay. In fact, I think the 2 that are close to 10 years on already with the police department. So it's just part of the game that we play. We've had attrition as high as 15% in the past, but usually it's like I said, it usually sits between about 3 and 5 officers a year is the attrition rate.
I was wondering if, like with the military, people are required to stay in service for a particular amount of time. Is that illegal in the civilian world?
It's not something that we typically do. I think other agencies have tried to have contracts signed, but just to kind of give you a view from a different world, I know people in different sectors that have the contracts, and the newer generation isn't afraid to break the contract and pay the fee. Okay. So they end up leaving, and not necessarily police, because we don't really usually offer contracts, but that is the typical what's going on at the moment.
You guys are still affected at the state level with the at-will conditions, right?
We do have the at-will conditions, absolutely, but they, for us, when they get off they have a year of probation. They get off probation, then obviously we have to. The only reason we would dismiss them is for cause, but they only have to provide 2 weeks' notice to leave.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I've got a couple questions for Matt. I'm not going to let you get off easy, Matt. And both of them deal with next steps. I appreciate the fact that you're on schedule for both of these, but what are the next steps for annexation? And what are the next steps that your department is going to take for the downtown redevelopment?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, next steps on annexation, we are still reconciling some of the addressing data in the county assessor office shapefile that we use in GIS. We are going to be proactively contacting owner-occupied homes in the coming months, and we have through September to complete the process and reach the 51% threshold.
Okay. And the other question is, if I'm a business owner in the designated area, when am I gonna find out how I apply to get money from the city to improve my business?
Sure. Well, the next step, the area's been designated. We are finalizing the redevelopment plan, which is the next step. That has to be reviewed first by Planning and Zoning Commission and then by council. There's a notification requirement that we have to go through. Currently, I'm doing outreach to schedule one-on-one meetings with the affected property owners to make sure that they agree with our planning recommendations, and then it'll be released for public review and comment as part of the approval process.
Okay. Yep.
And then our target date for launching the grant program, which is really the driving force behind this whole effort, is is late March, early May, or late March, early April.
Okay, all right.
And then with the presentation of the redevelopment plan, we'll get your final comments on the proposed guidelines for the grant program.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question as to, in the executive report, as to how the.
No. Well, can we go to the executive report in just a minute?
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're still on the last item.
Oh, my bad. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Anything else on this item? I guess we're up to the executive report.
Oh, awesome. I'm sorry. I just felt really in tune with the question you just asked. So with the grids that you have for the annexation, some of them show city property. And my question was, what does that mean? So do the city property plots just sort of fall out as far as the numbers that we need for annexation? Are they already a +1 for annexation, or how does that work?
You really subtract those from the overall totals because there's no assessed value as being city-owned, so it doesn't count as a signature or towards the assessed valuation.
Any other, well, I guess we'll go to, since we're done with that, we'll now go to the executive report. Mr. Petuchik, do you want to start?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. A number of things had occurred over the holiday season, most of them, fairly positive for us. The largest one and the one that was taking the most time was, making sure that the ambulance service under the Intergovernmental Services Agreement with Fort Huachuca was able to occur on January 1st. There were a number of issues dealing with the Arizona Department of Health Services and the issuance of a temporary certificate of necessity that they insisted needed to be in place in order for us to provide that service. Fort Huachuca and the city took an opposite viewpoint of that in that we did not feel that one was necessary. But we chose not to fight with the state, but to try to comply with their requirements. So there was a lot of, bureaucratic wrangling that went on for a number of weeks before we were able to obtain the temporary certificate of necessity. That was accomplished. The service took place as anticipated at midnight on January 1st, and the implementation process has gone very smoothly. And we've received a number of good comments from Fort Huachuca about the service that's being provided. So that's gone on. We've attended a hearing to then obtain permanent certificate of necessity on Fort Huachuca. That occurred on January 9th, and we anticipate hearing something positive about that very shortly. So that will then effectively allow us then to provide that service on the fort in accordance with what the state wants. Our consultant for our Fort Huachuca lobbying efforts and working with both Congress and the Pentagon, Lucian Niemeyer took a position in the Pentagon as Assistant Secretary of Defense for installations, which is good for us that he's in such a good position, bad for us because he was a very good consultant and had a lot of contacts. We participated in interviews with a couple of firms with Cochise County and the Fort Huachuca 50, and determined that a firm with Mr. Joseph Corrigan, who is the principal there that we would be working with, as recommended also by Mr. Niemeyer earlier, has been selected to continue that effort, and he will be in town the first week of February, I believe February 6th, and will be meeting board officials as well as us to determine our legislative agenda federally for the Fort Huachuca in the coming year. So we look forward to working with Mr. Corrigan, and hopefully everybody will have a chance to meet him soon. The Cochise Water Project, as I mentioned earlier, had its final board meeting. Funding ran out from the Walton Foundation. Interestingly, some 1,500 acre-feet per year were saved through the efforts of the Cochise Water Project. So that was a very good thing for us. We partnered with them on the toilet rebate program primarily. So in order for that program to continue, which has been very effective for us, unfortunately, the city will have to pick that up again. So that's something that will probably be in next year's budget proposal. Yes, Councilmember Calhoun.
Chuck, is that 1,500 acre feet of saving, is that an ongoing savings?
That's
or-
an annual savings through all the various efforts, rainwater harvesting, the golf course and parks, watering, all those kinds of things. So very good program, as well as toilet rebates. So those are some of the highlights. Staff is now starting to work towards next year's budget. We'll have the mid-year budget review coming up next month, as well as a review of your financial policy for updating, and we'll be very busy with the budget process after that. So those are some of the highlights.
Questions for Mr. Patucci?
One more.
Go ahead.
I was curious about the ambulance service, is that what you call it, at Fort Huachuca. Can you talk about if folks from the service at Fort Huachuca, the previous one, if any of those folks were hired on? Can you talk about that in public?
Well, Chief York, you can correct me, but I think we only received a couple of applications from them, which I found to be very unfortunate. Even though we have all of our positions filled, we are using a lot of part-time as part of the service right now, and we are extending the opportunity for those people to apply with the city, and if they choose to do so, we will take them on.
I saw in the report that there was some training going on, and I was kind of made the assumption that there were some folks that had come on from the other company.
Actually, not as many as we would have hoped.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Matt, on the emergency home repair, you said you have, you processed 4 applications. So how much money is that going to leave left to do?
There's $35,000 in funding available, and we received a lot of interest following the social media posts last Friday, so I'm hoping those will turn into applications.
Great.
And the 4 are done.
They're finished?
They're finished.
Oh,
they were all
fantastic.
inspected and completed.
Great. So
Pursuant
there's
to the approved scope.
35,000 left at this point?
Yes.
And each house is up to?
It varies depending on the scope of the repairs, but the max is $7,500.
Oh, 7,500. Okay. Okay, thank you.
There's about 5 more homes, 4 more homes available.
Anything else on the, yes, Mr. Patucci?
One thing I wanted to update the council on that's not necessarily in the report, but will be in future reports, is in the wintertime, we always experience an uptick in the homeless population in the community. And if you'll remember, near Walmart, there was an extremely large camp just to the area just north of Walmart. And we ended up having to go in and do a fairly extensive cleanup. We contracted with Rutherford Diversified Industries to assist us with that, and basically pulled like 80 tons of trash out of that camp. And that really wasn't there for that long of a period of time, but we're starting to experience a number of police and fire calls in the area as well. As some other problems that were associated with it. So that area has been cleaned up, but these cleanups are very expensive. The camps then start moving around town, and working with Matt's group, the police department, and Public Works, we're trying to develop some other policies that maybe we can bring to the council later in terms of how we plan on dealing with homelessness, both in terms of working with groups like Good Neighbor Alliance on the compassionate side, and of course then dealing with the law enforcement and cleanup efforts on the other side. But it is a problem that I don't think is going to go away anytime soon.
And that area behind Walmart is city land or is that state?
That was
land?
city land that we just
we had
cleaned up.
purchased.
The area north of Walmart was
Yeah.
city land, the area behind Walmart, which is to the west.
State land.
State trust
State,
land.
okay. I have a question for
Yes, ma'am.
Adam. Adam, can you talk a little, Chief Thrasher, sorry. Can you talk a little bit about your objective on the unmanned aircraft system? I was very curious about that.
Sure. Basically, we're doing a feasibility study. The unmanned aerial aircraft are being utilized by a lot of law enforcement agencies across the country. The main use of it is area searches, missing individuals, searching for suspects in the field, those type of things, where you don't have to put up a full helicopter to start doing the search. You can mount cameras on these things and infrared. That's the main purpose. They also serve purposes specifically for executing a search warrant for security purposes, high risk, critical incidents, hostage, barricade type situations. They can also be utilized by the fire department for during structure fires to look around the area. So what we're looking at in this one is applying for some grants to get out there. There'll be some very specific policies. Right now, we're reviewing the Department of Justice model policy regarding the use of unmanned aerial vehicles for law enforcement. And there's a bunch of other stringent, pilot license stuff that we have to match up with to deal with that. But the main uses, again, are those area searches. We do get many, I wouldn't say many, but multiple missing juvenile calls on stuff, and getting these things up quickly. They're very small. They can be carried in a suitcase type thing and get them up in the air quickly to do searches and that kind of stuff instead of having to wait for a helicopter or in the case of the helicopter not being available. So that's the purpose of what we're looking at with that.
Okay. Would that help alleviate some of the staffing issues also? Possibly?
I don't know if it would alleviate the staffing issues, although it could resolve these things quicker. So as an example, the most recent missing juvenile that we were out for multiple hours, bringing multiple people, we had a different mission going on with the helicopter at the time, so getting the area search was very difficult from the air. So it could resolve these quicker, so it certainly can reduce some overtime type things if we're able to get these up in the air. And it's also a safety issue regarding critical incidents, barricades, those kind of things, where we can get up and be able to do a visual. Say as an example, we get a search warrant during a critical incident, and we need to peek into the backyard, and we know the person's armed. You can use the unmanned aerial vehicle to do that surveillance for you, so you're not putting somebody at risk.
Okay. And then my last question about it was just because of the restricted airspace. Is that? Would that be?
It's not an issue. There's obviously certain regulations we'd have to comply with, but that's relatively easy to do.
Okay.
They stay below 400 feet. And they're cool.
Well, that's what I
Yeah.
wanted to. That's what I was wondering. The 400 feet thing. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And sorry, Mayor, just to revisit back, but it looks like in 2016 there were 2 police officer positions that had been frozen that were restored, and I think that's probably what I was talking about there. So
That sounds right.
Okay, so
Yeah, and then
I
there was
apologize for the
firemen.
confusion, but I know there was a bit of a change.
Okay.
Interesting with the UAS piece, as you guys start to uncoil that, I imagine there'll be some discussion that takes place in terms of what the policies could look like. And
Absolutely, and we'll be doing some press releases to talk about what we want to use them for. The DOJ guidelines are our guidance, but we're also looking at other agencies' policies and procedures about when and how it'll be used. And obviously, that's an important factor in the use of these things.
the similar to your body cameras, there will always be some sort of storage capacity requirement for the footage that's recorded.
If we do record it, absolutely. But you have options of not having to do it for recording purposes, just at a live feed. So that's some of the options that this objective is to look at, those type of issues.
So I would think if in situations like a barricade situation, you want to record that. However, if you're doing an area search for a small child, it may not be appropriate to record anything until you get to that point where you're actually going in to pick up the
That would
small
be right.
child.
I agree.
So, I mean, there's got to be some flexibility there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, you weren't finished.
I'm not finished. Chief York, it's your turn. So I was really happy with the numbers on the Christmas drive, by the way. That $15,000, was that cash and toys, or?
No, that was just cash.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So that was in addition to all the toys that were?
We can't estimate the values of the toys.
Okay.
I
I can estimate what I bought for them.
Yes,
but,
but I think we probably get a little more than you get.
Yeah, I think you do. Well, I'm glad to see that. And then on the second thing, you talk about us responding to automatic aid responses in the Fire District 546. Do you know about how many they had to help us with?
Theirs was
those
around
calls?
380. Theirs was less than what we did to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I really like the new coach ambulances. They look sharp.
The what?
The ambulance things. I don't know what they're called.
Vehicles.
Yeah, and I don't have notes.
Ambulance.
I'm sorry, I'm looking on my iPad. That's why it's taken me a minute to find my other stuff. Okay. I'm not going to talk about chickens because I'm sick of talking about chickens. But Matt, can you talk about the small cell wireless, the ordinance on that? Is that you?
Sure. It'll be coming to you for final reading on February 8th. The resolution will provide a permitting process and fee structure for telecommunication companies to locate their facilities in public rights-of-way pursuant to a state law that was passed last session, basically mandating that we accommodate small wireless facilities.
But that's not like towers.
No. Typically, they're going to be co-located on existing utilities like streetlights.
Or light poles, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Equipment will be mounted on existing fixtures, but there are provisions where they can install essentially their own poles, support equipment, but there are height limitations, and I believe it's 40 feet or not taller than 10 feet of the highest pole within 500 feet of the proposed site. So these aren't going to be towers per se, like 100, 80 to 100 foot towers.
It's not going to be a bunch of
should
pine
blend
trees.
in with the existing streetscape.
Okay.
For the most part.
Okay.
They'll be visible, but they won't be that conspicuous.
Okay. I think that the only other thing is I was happy to see on the permitting that was up for building houses, construction of houses, and then of course sales tax was up from last year. So I think those are all very positive things on our economy. And I think I'm done. I'll let you know if I come across
Anybody
anything
else on the report? Yes, ma'am.
My only thing that I would like to say is I was really happy to see that we could do the park for a very reasonable amount and have that open. And I just am really glad that you guys did that kind of work so that we could open that up for the public again.
Yeah, Purple Heart Park.
The Purple Heart
Yeah,
Park.
that was good. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to comment that I was really happy to read about the T-Rex program, the program for adults with disabilities, and surprised to see that that was the only evening program in the state, and hoping that we can maintain that. I think my next question is DES, DDD, are they covering the full cost of that program?
I'll jump in on that one, Councilmember Calhoun. Yes, they do cover the full cost of the program.
Okay, that's really amazing. It's amazing that we're the only ones doing it.
And we are able to charge. The fees are set by the state, but it is a full cost recovery program.
Wonderful, thank you.
You have two more over here, two more alibis.
Yeah, I got two more, I think. The reorganization, I'm not quite sure I understand why we were doing the reorganization with the parks, and so I just wanted a little bit of an explanation on what our thinking was there.
Want me to do it? You want me to do it? Hi.
Hi.
Go ahead, Laura.
I actually, after I started my new position as the Director of Leisure and Library Services, I started looking at efficiencies, and also prioritization of what we wanted to accomplish as a department. And one of the things was the sports fields and park improvements. And in order to do that, I approached the city manager, the assistant city manager, and Sharon, and we had a discussion about what makes sense. And it essentially just took a layer out of the approvals process so that we could react more quickly and that I could prioritize the budgets in line with our goals.
Okay, makes perfect sense. Thank you. And then check recycling. Does that mean our cost? What are we looking at?
Well, that's a topic we're going to have to discuss probably further in a work session. But essentially, I, as chair of the Rate Review and Advisory Board, in the last number of meetings that I've chaired at the county with our colleagues, basically the recycling market for reselling recyclables has essentially bottomed out. A lot of the recyclables in our country were going to China. That's not the case anymore. And in our agreement, there is, if the recyclables to make enough money to recover the costs, we could keep our tipping fee for recyclables at zero. Since that is no longer the case, and Sierra Vista does 97% of the recycling in Cochise County, we got hit with a bill for $37 a ton for our recycled materials last quarter. So,
in addition to our other tipping fees.
Yeah, which is 66.
Right.
So yes, recycling still is less expensive for us to tip than regular refuse, but we're now seeing an increase in those costs. And when you combine that with some of the losses we've experienced in commercial hauling due to private competition, it appears that we will have to discuss the potential of a refuse rate increase for next budget year. If we recall, a few years ago, we were actually able to reduce the rates because of recycling, and now, ironically, because of recycling, we're probably going to have to restore that fee. So
it was like a couple of
it was
dollars
like
every
$1.
cycle.
I don't anticipate, recommending a large increase, but David is analyzing that data right now. So unfortunately, in this day and age, recycling is not a money-making enterprise. It does have a value in terms of saving landfill space, but it unfortunately is another service that has a cost associated with it.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, we'll move on then to item D, Mrs. Calhoun.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council may remember that we submitted a request, that I submitted a request to have social service presentations at city council meetings on probably a monthly basis. And at the time, there was some concern about having it, I think, that regularly, and a couple of other suggestions about different ways to have these presentations. So at this point, I would like to recommend that we follow the recommendation that I submitted, have a social service presentation once a month, and try that for 3 or 4 months to see if the council finds it beneficial to learn more about what's going on with some of the citizens in our community. And then after 3 to 4 months or 5 or 6 months, whatever you think is suitable, then we'll reevaluate and see if it's helpful for us to have that information. I think in addition to us having information about what essentially nonprofits or state agencies are doing to help citizens in the community, it would also give the community an opportunity to hear what's going on with other citizens in our community. So I just would like us to decide if this is something you think would be worthwhile for the council.
Okay, if my memory serves correctly, this last we were talking about doing it at instead of a formal council meeting was it a work session?
It did come up, yeah.
It was at a work session, and that also that the two ladies to my left and right, we're going to get together and talk about it. So the first question is this the recommendation as a result of your confab?
Well, no, because of the holidays, we've actually not been able to really have a big discussion, but I'm okay with trying it for the 3 to 4 month period to see if we find it beneficial. I guess my only question about that is, are we going to just do one for that 1 month to just one agency, or
instead of grouping them? But I think we could try both and see.
Well, I just meant we're not going to have 5 at a work session, so.
No, just one.
Just one.
Right. And for instance, the first one could actually be something like the county health department giving the finals on the community assessment for Sierra Vista, and that would just give us an overall picture of the health in several categories of the community. And then following that, we consult. I would consult with folks, with whoever staff would be involved, but primarily I thought I could, between all of us, we could make decisions about who would present or what topic would present, and then I would find that agency that would do a presentation.
Yeah, and Gwen had indicated that she was willing to take point on this, to invite the agencies and make sure they were aware of the information.
And consult with staff about the guidelines which were in here in the, I'm going to see, where are they? Raising, no, that wasn't it. That we would give them the agency's guidelines. And I know primarily among the guidelines was that it wasn't about financial support from
They
the
couldn't
community.
ask for funding.
It was strictly to raise awareness of how many they're serving.
Awareness and education.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess what we're looking for today is consensus of council. Do we proceed?
I concede. I consent.
Oh, concede, I was going to
Do we
say.
have anybody, are there any, I guess you should ask it this way, are there any objections to trying this program?
My only statement would be to make sure that there is a time limit. I know, like, for
Good.
example, today would be awesome, but I know some of our work sessions tend to go.
And I think the
Very
original
long.
suggestion was a 15-minute presentation with
10
at
to
least
15.
5 to 10 minutes for council questions. So we'll try to keep it short and sweet.
And the agency would have an opportunity to answer any questions we may have.
Yeah.
Can we, however you guys determine you're going to do it, can we get read-aheads? That way we can start formulating questions before we.
If the nonprofit provides that, that'd be awesome.
We can certainly
can ask them
request that they provide the city clerk their presentation if they have one.
Perfect.
Okay.
And,
And let's put a cap on it. Do we want to do 3 months or 4 months?
okay, say,
Well, I think what we need to look at is, what I would recommend is we project 6 months, one a month for 6 months, and about month 4 we start reevaluating so that we know whether we're going to invite for 6 or 7, 8, 9, or we're cutting them off at 5.
That
What do you
makes
think?
sense.
Is that a way to proceed?
sure,
Okay.
sure. I just, I think
Mr.
it's.
Patuchik.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just think it's important enough that we do at least, carry it out at least 4 months and then evaluate around 4 and decide on the next 2 months.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, in order that we as staff, might assist you in this endeavor, is there any, particular information that you might be looking for from these agencies? Say, obviously what they do, but number of clients they
scope and purpose.
serve. What is their staff? What is their
Yeah, and
budget?
I think Craig hit it, what is their task, what is their scope, what is their purpose?
And that way we can kind of format
Maybe some
something.
historical data, what they've done in the past, what they're looking to do in the future. I mean,
Yeah, just mission and vision statements and that's all we're looking for.
what they've accomplished.
So if you give us, which agencies you would, like us to contact or whatever, we can kind of help that along.
You can be the council lead on this, that.
Okay, sure, that works. Can't see handing it off to somebody else after it coming up with.
Well, we're happy to assist.
Who should I talk with to kind of synopsize this into a document?
If
Just a
you could
brief
work
summary?
with our office, then Jen and
Okay.
Yvette would be great.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much. And
Okay.
thank you all.
Any further discussion on this item? Okay, we'll move on to report, recent trips, meetings, future meetings. I will share with you that the PSPRS meeting that was supposed to happen last Friday in Bisbee was canceled. And when I talked to the mayor today in Bisbee, it was canceled because he could only get 5 mayors there. Everybody had conflicts with the date, and he couldn't get the appropriate legislators there, so that was canceled for that reason. On the 9th, I will be going up for the League of Cities and the Executive Board of League of Cities in town and talk about legislative issues. One of the legislative issues that was interesting is there was a gentleman from Scottsdale who decided that he was going to basically go tell the cities how to run elections, to include requiring us to have a primary. And that was killed on Friday. And I've alerted our legislative District 14 folks that that doesn't need to come up again in some other forum. So hopefully that'll stay away. Well, that was the same thing with the partisan on the election. It was the same bill. So does anybody have any recent trips, meetings, or future meetings they need to report on? Yeah, it's not official.
I got a lot of trips I could report on, Mayor. But the meeting, the Boy Scouts asked me to come in and speak tonight, so I'll be there at 6 o'clock this evening. I have to check my calendar to see exactly where, but it's somewhere on the city calendar.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Meetings, future meetings? Yes,
oh,
ma'am.
go ahead.
Okay, this is not a meeting per se, but I have been catching up on the Friday Focus morning show, and I thought I would say good job and thank you to the mayor and Matt and Chief Thrasher and Tony
yeah.
for their great job keeping the community informed of what's been going on with the city. They were very informational, so thank you.
Yeah, well, I listened to Tony. He did a very good job the other weekend.
Yeah.
Or the other week. So appreciate it, Tony.
And I love that they record it, so we don't have to get up that early.
Yeah,
You can go back
they
and
replay
listen.
it. So
You didn't
that's
like
good.
you didn't like my interview? It was awesome.
I didn't listen to it.
Okay.
Moving right along.
Moving
I
right
didn't
along.
either.
Board and commission liaison updates.
I want to mention a meeting.
Oh, you want to mention
Yeah,
me? I'm sorry.
I want to mention that I attended the NAACP Martin Luther King Remembrance Breakfast. And the reason I particularly want to mention that is because Judge Maurice Portley, who is a Sierra
did a great
Vista
job.
resident, did a beautiful presentation. I know I saw you there, Mayor. As a matter of fact, I have you in a picture that was taken during that. But he's a Sierra Vista resident. I just thought folks would find that interesting. Maybe some of you knew him as he
Went
grew
to high
up here in
school.
the city.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting. And I want to just comment, too, that the State Transportation Board met last Friday here.
I didn't mention that. Huh?
And I only was able to sit in for a little bit of it, but it was interesting. I think it's cool that so many of the state commissions do travel around the state and have their meetings in different cities. And when we have a chance, it's neat to drop in, and they're always nice about the fact that they can use our facility. And anyway, I just think that was nice that they thank us for that, but it's nice to listen to what's going on across the state, too. And I believe that was it.
Okay, board and commission updates. Yes, ma'am.
So planning and zoning is now full, or will be
Will be on
Thursday if
Thursday.
we approve the two, which I think were very suitable candidates. And they also decided, did they table it? And is that what we're calling it? They tabled it to talk about it in
Right.
February?
Yeah, they wrestled with the backyard chicken ordinance, and they requested staff research a couple amendments they'd like to see included in the proposed resolution. And so they're continuing the discussion at their next meeting. So the schedule that was in your executive report is going to slide to the right by one meeting if things stay on track.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the Cultural Diversity Commission, we had a lot of people whose they came up and expired.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Mount, that is correct. Right now, the Cultural Diversity Commission does not have enough members to achieve a quorum.
So whatever help we can do to get some people recruited in,
We need 'em.
would be helpful, because they're not meeting right now.
And when is the diversity fair normally happen? It should be shortly.
It's very, yeah,
So
it's,
probably not gonna happen this year, would be my guess, if we don't get some folks on there right away. Or it'd be extremely
Jill.
tough. Jill?
It's my understanding that that event is being currently planned by leisure staff, and they are communicating with the existing Diversity Commission members to see if they want to volunteer to help.
Okay.
They can't help as a commission right now, but staff is proceeding with that event.
Okay.
And we're doing some social media recruiting, I've seen, for commissions.
well, when I went through yesterday, just to kind of start getting caught up on some things, I know there's a lot of vacancies that are
There's
sitting
a
out there.
lot of
That's not just the
vacancies.
one commission, so we need to, Chuck, we need to figure a way to hit that harder.
I'm seeing
compiling.
it,
And we
I'm
as
seeing it every
individuals on the
day.
council when we see people that are interested in certain areas, we need to make recommendations and explain how they can become active members of the community by being a commissioner.
Because they need to then, since they can't go to that particular commission meeting, I guess they come directly to you, Jill, or to the front desk to put in an application?
Do
Or
it
they do it
online.
online?
Yeah, they can do it online, they can go to the front desk, they can probably even give it to the Parks and Rec Department. Here I go again, showing my age. Library and Leisure Services.
Yes.
To do that,
Okay.
okay? Anything else on commissions? All right. We already had one future discussion item with the social services presentation. Anything else or any council requests? I'm sorry.
I'm not sure how we're handling tasking of the commissions, but I would like to propose that we talk about maybe tasking the West End Commission with the ability to talk about, there's sort of a stigma right now that the West End is unsafe, which I feel is untrue, completely untrue. But I think that would be a good thing for our commission to kind of grapple with as to how we can tackle that.
Concur.
Well, I think that's appropriate. Yeah.
Oh, I do too.
And,
But do we need to, is there a process to talk about it
Is
at a
that-
work session,
well,
future work
I'd have to
session,
look-
and then
I'd have
task
to
them?
look. I'd have to look at their current mission statement, but if I remember it correctly, it should be in there, because their job should be to promote the vitality of the west side, I think is the word I want to use.
Do they have
I
a
could
quorum
add
right
that
now?
they do.
They do?
Yeah, and I could add that they actually have kind of grappled with that a little bit too, with focusing positive information on the West End. So I think how do we get that information to them? Do we need to write it up, or do I just go to the next meeting and say the council would like?
thought
I
we
can't
put that
remember what the
procedure in
guidelines say.
place to task them.
We do. I forgot what it says, but
Well-
I'll talk with Jill and we'll
There you
figure it
go.
out.
Mayor, members of council, the process is any of you can propose that one of these items be placed on a work session agenda and discussed and voted on by the council.
That's right, it has to be.
Or a consensus of council would then task the commission.
Yeah, so then we need to go ahead and put that on for the next work session.
Will do, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
We do it the next work session, since I'm not gonna be here, I'd like to have that discussion.
Do you
Unless you want me
agree?
to call in.
Well, I think you should call in.
Okay, I could call in from Mississippi.
Can we do that for work sessions? Call in?
No.
Is that, I didn't think.
I just watch it on YouTube.
We'll put
It's
you on
free
Skype.
television,
We'll have to
usually.
watch it on streaming.
That's what I do, yeah. It's a good thing y'all can't hear what I'm saying
We
sometimes.
beam worldwide, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, can I
So-
make one more comment, sir? I just happened to flip past this. I really like that That's How We Roll campaign that our
Judy.
BIO office is doing, and that there's an article in the newspaper downstairs, I mean, in the reading room, and it's just that is such a nice graphic. I really think that's a smart thing for the community. What?
Okay. Anything else? Yes, Chuck.
One thing I did want to mention, probably should have when the mayor brought up the one bill that seems to have been killed in committee of the legislature. Legislature hasn't been meeting that long, but we're closing in on 1,000 bills dropped already and many more opportunities to do so. We want you to know that we are working closely with the league and the tri-advocates on any that are of interest to Sierra Vista specifically, and we're working a couple of those, but you do get the reports from the league and Tri-Advocates. If you're not, please let us know, and we'll make sure it moves fast and furious, so it's good to be informed as to what's going on up there.
Could we ask too that as any issues come up that are the ones where you have to jump on it right away, that you notify us on municipal issues so that we can make calls that we feel as individuals that we would like to make. But if it's municipal issues, if you just call that to our attention, you know, we read that, but I'm not always sure what's right up there to be dealt with at what particular time.
And many times they do ask for people to call, you know, the legislative delegation on items, so we can certainly let you know.
Give us a heads up or something. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Unless somebody's got something else, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the 31st thing isn't happening. Okay. And I'd be at